all my outfits because I thought
sew them back on, Brian.
Right, I guess I got to snap them back on now at least. Meanwhile, we have a lot to discuss today, a lot to go through because a lot happened yesterday and through the night, especially if you're in Israel.
Plus, something happened in Brian's office. It's dramatic.
Right.
And you're going to see it at the end of today.
Right. A bomb went off in your office how many years ago? 22 years ago when you started at Fox, and we're finally cleaning it up.
Right. Yes. And it took 14 hours.
I think there's still a
14 hours
people
to clean.
in hazmat suits went into his office, and you will see the finish.
But I think that when you're done with this, I think that you'll understand a little bit more about your how to clean your house and organize your house.
We're going to find out what brings you joy. Have you ever watched that show?
Yeah. Marie Kondo.
Yeah, she pulls things out. Does this bring you joy? If it does, you can keep it. If not, you throw it.
I heard about
say
that.
Goodbye.
And you have to say goodbye to the item.
I now have a joyless office.
Anyway, so we've got a busy 3 hours. It starts right now with a Fox News alert. Staggering new numbers painting a clearer picture of the crisis at our southern border.
All right, this, as border agents give alarming testimony on Capitol Hill describing a caravan-sized influx of immigrants from all parts of the globe. Not a politician. This is an expert.
And Griff Jenkins was at that hearing, and he joins us live in Washington. Griff, what did they have to say?
Boy, they had a lot to say. Good morning, guys. Remember Border Patrol Chief Rudy Karish, who we visited last week in the Rio Grande Valley sector? Well, he came to the Hill yesterday to the Senate Homeland Security Committee, along with other officials, to give lawmakers a frontline perspective of that crisis at the border.
Much media attention has focused on caravans from Central America, but the fact is that RGV is receiving caravan equivalent numbers of migrants every 7 days.
And the new numbers are staggering. CBP says more than 92,000 migrants were apprehended in March, up from 66,000 in February. And the total is actually over 103,000 when you add in the inadmissibles. 67% were families and unaccompanied children. Chief Karish sounding the alarm on the unprecedented tactics being used, imploring lawmakers to act.
Make no mistake about it, the word is getting out. If you bring a child, you will be released. Our agents apprehended an adult Honduran male with a one-year-old child. The man admitted the child was not, in fact, his. I implore Congress to consider legislative action that restores integrity to our immigration system.
And Karish noted the apprehensions include people from 50 different countries, including China, Bangladesh, Turkey, Egypt, and Romania. Meanwhile, the president continues retooling his Homeland Security team. News this morning, the contracts worth $1 billion to build 60 new miles of the wall, announced last month by the Pentagon, have now been granted. Guys?
Griff, you were at a hearing on immigration yesterday. What did you see?
Well, in that hearing, I took a photo. I want to put it up for you. You're looking at Chairman Ron Johnson, who chairs that Homeland Security Committee, with the officials from the front line sharing their perspective, and it is all empty chairs. No other senator apparently had the time to stay and hear every minute of these officials talk about the front line. The chairman, Senator Peters of Michigan, the ranking member, the Democrat, not there, along with Republicans and Democrats. Now, in fairness, it's not unusual. The senators come and go for their 10 minutes of questioning. Right. But the fact that we're dealing with a crisis at the border, and yet nobody but the chairman was there at the end when they made their final closing remarks, was stunning for me. And I've covered the Hill for more than 20 years.
That is something.
And you know this is a crisis. And unless Democrats get on board with it, we cannot wait a year and a half to address this problem, because it's not just manpower, it's not just a wall. These are simple rules that have to be addressed by lawmakers.
That's exactly right. It is in Congress's hands. We may begin to see, Brian, some Democrats start to put forth solutions, certainly as it relates to these families and children, because, as I asked the president last week, we could be looking at another generation of DACA.
Hey, Griff, let's just the president should draw up, as Lindsey Graham told him yesterday, you'll see it next hour, 4 things that he wants done in Congress. At least let leadership, minorities and majorities, mark it up, decide that if it's valid or not, and say, at least they have a plan. Instead of talking at each other, make them comment about something in black and white.
Without a doubt, it is time, clearly in a bipartisan manner, time for lawmakers to come together. And as we saw in that hearing, that photo, it's time for them to listen to every single moment these officials are telling us. Otherwise, we're not going to get any progress made.
I don't understand how some people can deny that it's not a crisis. When you hear those numbers yesterday, RGV, the Rio Grande sector, Valley sector, receiving caravan equivalent numbers every 7 days, Gruff.
Let me tell you, when I was there last week, Ainsley, they described it to me as, they said, you went to Iraq and covered that, right? Well, for these guys who had war fatigue after 4 or 5 deployments, our men and women in the green uniform on the Border Patrol are stretched so thin, so exhausted, dealing with thousands every day. This is... For their professionalism, it is unbelievable that they continue to do it, but they cannot continue. The fact that we hear from officials it's unsustainable, it is every bit that.
We don't have the manpower, and we don't have enough shelters down there to house these individuals. Thank you so much, Gruff. And to hear that so many of them are coming from other countries, too, from Bangladesh, from China, 50 different countries.
Unbelievable. Griff touched on the fact that there are some Democrats who are talking about legislation. The Associated Press, just about an hour ago, broke a story that said that they are coming up with a proposal, the Democrats are, to make it look like they're doing something, because the president's saying, where are the Democrats? Well, some of the proposals, more money for ports and processing refugees, create centers in Central America so they can apply for asylum there, and also do what they can to reduce poverty and also gang violence so people won't leave. And the Democrat lawmakers know there is 0% chance it's going to pass the Republican Senate, and the president won't sign it. It is simply optics in the year before an election.
All right, let's talk about the child separation policy, because instead of solving a problem, they want to say the president put kids in cages. And we hear this over and over again from AOC and everybody on down. Well, what is the reality there? The president addressed that yesterday while he sat next to the president of Egypt.
President Obama separated the children. Those cages that were shown, I think they were very inappropriate. They were built by President Obama's administration, not by Trump. President Obama had child separation. Take a look. The press knows it. You know it. We all know it. I'm the one that stopped it. President Obama had child separation. Now, I'll tell you something. Once you don't have it, that's why you see many more people coming. They're coming like it's a picnic, because let's go to Disneyland. President Obama separated children. They had child separation. I was the one that changed it.
Yeah, he did. He signed an executive order last June ending the separations.
And he's right. They did have family separations in some cases during the Obama administration. The difference between that and the Trump administration was the Trump administration instituted a zero tolerance policy, and that was the that got all the publicity, and that is what he ended. Meanwhile, when you look at the facts, sometimes you don't get the facts, according to Ben Shapiro. Listen to this.
This has been taken as evidence that the president of the United States is a brutal, horrible, terrible man. Now, again, Barack Obama kept kids in cages in 2014. All of the original pictures that were brought up a couple of years ago were from the Obama administration, not from the Trump administration. Nonetheless, it is now considered something deeply horrible to say to people crossing the border and claiming asylum, we need to adjudicate your claim, and now you have the option. You can stay with your kids in custody, or you can make sure that your kids are taken care of with a family relation while you wait for your turn. But we are not going to simply just say you get to go free into the interior of the United States. How that is unreasonable is absolutely beyond me. But according to the left, this is the equivalent of white supremacy.
Right. Also, by the way, Mark Morgan, who was there on Border Patrol during the Obama years, said, yes, they absolutely did. If you couldn't determine who the parent actually was, and was actually the parent, we would separate them. If they were a convicted criminal or had warrants for a serious crime, they were separated. We did that under President Obama, because a lot of times, and the problem still lingers today, they come across with a kid, it might be your kid, you might not. We have to 23andMe DNA kits at the border to decide if that kid was taken from another family.
It's all about the safety of the child. Would the child be safe with that person?
Right.
So, anyway, switching gears for just a minute. At an event supporting CARE a while back, Ilhan Omar was there, and she was talking about the organization, and she was also talking about the largest terror attack in American history. And the way she described it has a lot of people just scratching their heads. What's she talking about? Watch this.
CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties.
Some people did something, she said. She does not describe a terror attack by terrorists on the United States, but some people did something.
A lot of people are upset about this. Social media was blowing up yesterday. Congressman Dan Crenshaw, the guy from Texas, you know him, we've had him on, and he fought for our country, lost his eye fighting for our country. He took offense to this, and he said, first member of Congress to ever describe terrorists who killed thousands of Americans on 9/11 as some people who did something. Unbelievable.
Yeah, those are his words, and I know you have a lot of words. This would have been an opportunity for a Muslim American to say, let me just tell you how Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Al-Shabaab, and others don't represent our religion, and that maybe maybe we got lumped in together. Instead, she doesn't take this opportunity to disseminate what she thinks and what Salafist Sunni Muslims think, because on a daily basis, whether it's through drone strikes, observations, our special operators are all there trying to contain this infection, which is Muslim extremists. Why she wouldn't use herself and her leadership position to separate the American Muslim from that school of thought is beyond me.
Well, that event was in March in Los Angeles. There were hundreds of protesters outside after she made those comments about the Benjamins.
And that should be unacceptable to Democrats as well as Republicans. Let's see what Nancy Pelosi says, because she's the leader.
Some people did something. All right, 6:11 here in New York City. Jillian joins us on this Wednesday morning with the Fox News Alert.
That's right. Good morning to you at home as well. Let's start with this Fox News Alert. We now know the names of 3 Marines killed in a Taliban bombing. Staff Sergeant and FDNY veteran Christopher Slutman, Sergeant Ben Hines, and Corporal Robert Hendricks dying in combat. 7 troops have been killed in combat in Afghanistan this year. Sergeant Slutman was due to come home in just 3 weeks. One of President Trump's strongest allies appears to be headed toward re-election in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his challenger both claiming victory, despite exit polls showing a razor-thin race. Netanyahu is hoping to secure a 5th term following a vote viewed as a referendum on his administration. We'll have a live report from Jerusalem in just a few minutes. Attorney General William Barr putting together a team to determine what sparked the Russia probe. The AG testifying in front of lawmakers on Capitol Hill.
The Office of the Inspector General has a pending investigation of the FISA process in the Russian investigation, and I expect that will be complete probably in May or June, I am told.
Barr is expected to testify again this morning. Let's look at your headlines. I'll send it back to you.
That was quite a hearing yesterday.
Yes, it was.
A lot of it here on the channel.
All right. Thanks so much. Well, colleges given thousands to help illegals escape ICE. Guess who's paying for it? You are. That is next.
The state of New Jersey is doling out $250,000 taxpayer dollars for students at 2 law schools in the state to represent illegal immigrants in court. Our next guest says taxpayers are being ripped off by their own elected officials. Dale Wilcox is the executive director of Immigration Reform Law Institute. He joins us right now live from D.C. Dale, good morning to you.
Good morning.
The New Jersey Department of Treasury is devoting $2.1 million to legal representation for residents with immigration-related troubles, including this money going to the law school. I'm paying my taxes this week. I guess that's where my money's going.
It's absurd. Clearly, the governor of New Jersey and these taxpayer-funded legal clinics are prioritizing the needs and interests of illegal aliens above American citizens. American citizens don't even get this treatment. Remember, removal proceedings is what we're talking about here. Removal proceedings are civil matters. This is not a criminal matter. If an illegal alien was caught up in a crime, which many illegal aliens commit crimes, identity theft and whatnot, they get taxpayer-funded lawyers through public defenders' offices. We're talking about a civil matter here. Think about this. Are there not any poor and indigent Americans in New Jersey who might need free legal counsel for, say, maybe foreclosure or eviction proceedings, child custody battles, divorce proceedings. This is unfair to Americans.
Well, it does, the way you describe it, it does seem like a double standard. The two schools are Rutgers Law School and Seton Hall Law School. Seton Hall didn't get back to us, but Rutgers put out this statement. This pilot program ensures that New Jersey residents, many of whom have valid claims for relief, are not needlessly separated from their families without their day in court. We are proud of our part in this pilot program. But once again, it does go back to this is legal representation for people who are in the country illegally, and it's being financed by the people who pay taxes, like me, in New Jersey.
Yeah, make no mistake about this. This is a political statement. The governor is thumbing his nose at federal immigration authorities. He's attempting to help those individuals who are here unlawfully stay in the country. He's looking at potential future voters. That's what the bottom line is here.
We're not officially a sanctuary state, but what is the sanctuary status of New Jersey, real quick?
Well, many jurisdictions in New Jersey and even statewide will ignore ICE detainer requests. So officially, they don't have a state law like California, but practically, yes, it is a sanctuary jurisdiction.
All right. Dale Wilcox with the very latest from the Garden State. Sir, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. What do you think about that? Email us, friends@foxnews.com. Also, of course, we are on Facebook. Meanwhile, if you thought the nation's immigration crisis is cause Democrats can't acknowledge, there is one thing again. AOC says it's because of climate change. We're going to talk about that coming up. We bet Tomi Lahren has something to say about that.
Glad you're up. Hope you're dressed. Here are your headlines. Texas Tech Medical School will no longer factor in race in its admissions process. The school is scrapping affirmative action as part of an agreement with the Department of Education. 14 years ago, someone filed a complaint about Texas Tech, even though they didn't apply to the school. And California Democrats approved a bill to force health clinics to provide abortion pills on college campuses. According to the Washington Times, that is. The College Student Right to Access Act would cost about $10 million in private funds. It's expected to be passed by the full state Senate. Now this.
Meanwhile, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez thinks she has the answer to what is fueling the immigration crisis on our southern border.
The freshman Democrat tweeting out, the far right loves to drum up fear and resistance to immigrants. But have you ever noticed they never talk about what's causing people to flee their homes in the first place? Perhaps that's because they'd be forced to confront one major factor fueling global migration. Climate change.
Exactly. Here to react, Fox Nation host Tomi Lahren. Tomi, it all comes back to the new Green Deal.
Yeah, she's still trying to make that happen, even though members of her own party didn't stand up and support her on that one. But again, this is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez projecting more excuses as to why illegal immigration is okay and we should all accept it. I think that she and other Democrats are starting to see that Americans are waking up. Americans are seeing that there is, in fact, a crisis at the border. Americans are tired of being taken advantage of. Even Democrats, I believe, are starting to see this. We're seeing even Obama-era officials saying that we have an immigration problem. So what do? They pile on more excuses. Now, illegal immigrants are coming to this country due to climate change. Again, excuse after excuse to try to feed this to the American people. I don't think it's going to work, especially when it's being fed by someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Well, it is something we hadn't heard before, something new. All right, meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about something new. The president's approval rating is now, according to Rasmussen, at 53%. I think I saw somewhere online this morning that it is higher than any of the approval ratings for former President Obama at any time in his third year. Meanwhile, Chelsea Handler was on The View yesterday, and she had this observation about white privilege, and we were so taken by the bite, we thought everybody should see it this morning, so here she is yesterday on The View.
So I figured start with myself so that, I can hang myself out to dry at my own privilege, at my own reaction to the presidency, like a spoiled brat. Like, what? Like the way that so many people were crying and screaming. And it was like, well, nothing in your life has ever gone that wrong before? And I really had to take a look and go, no. Yes, my brother died. That was traumatic and awful. But I've never been hungry. I've never been starving. I've never been discriminated against that I knew about. And I think as a person with a platform, you have to start thinking about what kind of contribution you're going to make when we see the things that are going on in this world.
Well, how did Chelsea handle that?
Well, I think at least she's finally being honest that she is indeed a spoiled brat. But look, she was also on Real Time with Bill Maher last week, and she was saying how the election of Donald Trump forced her to seek psychiatric help. She had to pay a therapist to rant about Donald Trump for the first 3 weeks after the election. It caused her to smoke marijuana. Again, this is liberals with Trump derangement syndrome who can't seem to accept a fair and free election. They also can't stomach the fact that Americans think differently than they do and that they voted differently than those in Hollywood and those liberals. So I'm glad that she is recognizing her privilege, but it's not white privilege, it's liberal privilege, and I hope that more like her will do the same.
All right, Tommy, thank you so much. I know your book goes on sale July 2nd, so people can pre-order that now. It's called Never Play Dead, and there's the cover. Congratulations.
And also you can catch her on Fox Nation.
That's right.
Twice a day.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thanks, Tommy.
Twice a day, every day. Thank you, guys.
Indeed. All right.
28 minutes after the top of the hour. A new study says half of the pastors out there are afraid to speak out on social issues because they might offend someone. How can we change that? Our panel of pastors here to discuss that next.
All right. One of President Trump's strongest allies appears to be headed towards a fifth term in office.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now likely reelected. I said likely, for sure at this point. Trey Yingst is live in Jerusalem with the latest on a razor-thin race. Trey.
Steve, Brian, official results this morning do indicate that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will likely serve a fifth term as Israeli Prime Minister. After nearly all the votes have been counted, Netanyahu's Likud party became the largest, beating their main competitors, the Blue and White Party, by more than 10,000 votes. Netanyahu now has a large advantage in forming a coalition government over the next month and a half, since all parties to his right would like to see him stay in that position. The Prime Minister will have 42 days to join with other smaller parties to reach at least a 61-seat majority in the Israeli Knesset. His top opponent of the Blue and White Party, Benny Gantz, also declared victory last night after seeing a lead in exit polls. The Prime Minister is facing charges on bribery and corruption this year, which could make governing more difficult. But for now, yesterday's election was a big victory for Netanyahu. Now, the election was largely seen as a referendum on Benjamin Netanyahu for both his opponents and supporters. One key supporter we have not yet heard from, though, President Trump. Back to you, Brian, Steve.
And Trey, when will they have the final results?
In the next few hours, we'll be getting more numbers in. About 97 to 99% of the votes are in. There's a few votes within the Israeli army that still have to come in. That could be anywhere between 500 to 1,000 votes, and those votes are expected to go to the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu.
And then he'll have a difficult time forming a government in the parliamentary system, but he's done that before. Trey, thanks.
All right.
Okay.
Ainsley?
Thank you, Steve. Thanks, Brian. There's new research that is shining a light on the pressures from our pastors, the pressures that they face from the pulpit. The study finds half of American Christian pastors worry about preaching on hot-button issues, concerned that they might offend someone. 69% say they do feel pressure to discuss controversial topics, while 64% feel limited by their ability to do so. Here to weigh in on this is our panel, Pastor Michael Youssef from the Church of the Apostle down in Atlanta, along with Pastor Corey Brooks from New Beginnings, that church in Chicago, and Pastor Ron Lewis from Every Nation Church here in New York City. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Great to be with you, Ainsley.
Great to see you, all three of you. Pastor Brooks, I'll start with you. Do you feel, with this climate that our country is facing right now, do you feel more pressure than ever before?
I think so. I think the pressure.
Sorry, go ahead, Pastor Brooks.
Okay. Okay, I think the pressure is for a lot of pastors to be bold, to be loving, and to set examples. I think a lot of preachers around the country feel that pressure from day to day. There's a great need in our society for us to preach what we preach and to teach what we teach. But from the study, it appears that a lot of pastors are having a very difficult time doing that.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't feel that pressure, but I know a lot of pastors that do.
Pastor Youssef, what about you?
I agree. Yes, there is some pressure, but in the end you have to decide, are you going to please God and obey His word, or are you going to please people? Now, as Bible-believing Christians, we love everybody. We have no phobes, because love casts out fear, but no fear in Christ. But nonetheless, as we love people, we must always say, as pastors, thus says the Lord, rather than thus says Michael Youssef or so-and-so or so-and-so. And that's really vitally important.
Pastor Lewis, do you ever feel like you have to watch what you say in church now?
Sure, I do feel that way sometimes. I would not say that I have a lot of pressure on me or concerns like, that we can't speak the truth. I think for me it's always having the right tone, it's speaking the truth in love, it's having good quality information on what the issues are and how to address them. So I think we're changing with the times, and that is not the message as much as the method, and really understanding our audience and their needs as well.
According to the study, the pastors feel limited about speaking about certain topics, some hot button issues like homosexuality, LGBT. 44% said they feel limited when they have to talk about these issues. Pastor Brooks, do you address those types of issues at the pulpit, or do you let people make their own decisions according to the word or whatever their feelings might be?
We address the issues. Our job as pastors and preachers is to communicate God's word, communicate the truth. And anytime we decide that we're not going to preach certain subjects because they're hot topics, then we're limiting ourselves. So we have to preach the whole counsel of God. We have to be accountable to preach the whole counsel. And my prayer is that more pastors will be removed from this pressure to have to, make their congregation feel comfortable. The gospel that we preach is not always a comfortable message, and so we have to preach it and declare it regardless of how people may feel.
Pastor Youssef, how do you handle these issues?
I agree with Pastor Brooks. If it's in the book, I'm going to preach it. And I think all of us as pastors, we have dealt with families who have children, who have all sorts of lifestyles, and I always say to them, you love them, and you love them, and then you love them some more, but you never compromise your conviction, and you say, I love you, but I would not approve of what you're doing. So that is really important, as Pastor Brooks talking about, speaking the truth in love, and not be afraid, because you are serving God and you're serving the congregation and you're speaking for God to the congregation. The moment that is reversed, we're going to please people and we're not going to please God. We're in trouble. And that's what's happening in America. The reason morality has gone out of the window is because the pulpits, and I lay the blame on the pulpits and the preachers, have ceased to preach the truth.
Pastor Lewis, how would Jesus respond this day and age to some of these issues?
Well, Jesus is our model. He's not only our example, but He's our Lord, and He's the one to whom we owe everything to in our lives and our message. And Jesus was full of grace and truth. And you can give it the example of the time that He was given the woman who had committed adultery right in the act of adultery, and she was dragged out before Jesus, and the religious community around her had stones in their hands. They were going to destroy her. And they said, what would you do? And Jesus said, whoever among you is the first without sin, you can cast the stone. And I think that in that moment, they all dropped their stones. They all said, we don't have anything to do with this. We're just going to walk away from it. Jesus looked at the woman. She said, do they condemn you? And He said, neither do I. I don't condemn you. And I think in that example, we have both grace and truth. And we have to have both of those in the pulpit. We can't just have truth alone without grace. Grace is what gives truth really the clothing to be understood, truth understood. Truth without being understood is not very helpful. And at the same time...
But he also said to her, go and sin no more.
Yes, he did. And if I left that out, I apologize. And that's where the truth comes in. And that's the truth of it. And grace and truth work together. And that's our message, and that's our example, that's our model. We have both of those.
Thank you so much, guys, for being with us. Yes, we're all sinners, and that's why we need a Savior.
Yes.
Thank you so much. God bless you all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ainsley.
All right, Jillian has some headlines for us. Jillian?
That's right. Good morning to you, Ainsley. 2 Americans who vanished on vacation 2 weeks ago are believed to be dead. Officials in the Dominican Republic are working to identify a body found inside a car in the ocean, thought to be Orlando Moore. His girlfriend, Portia, was found unconscious on the side of the road. Police think they crashed their car into the ocean on the way to the airport. Watch as a power pole collapses on a road, impaling an SUV with a couple sitting inside. The driver and his wife escaping with just cuts and bruises. The utility pole, just one of 26 falling throughout Seattle, including this one, that barely missed a biker. The power company says the poles were inspected in 2016 and not considered a safety hazard. Chick-fil-A gets an unusual excuse from one city that's fighting over a new airport location. City council members in San Jose, California, say they can't extend contracts for businesses that are not open 7 days a week. As you know, Chick-fil-A is closed on Sundays to observe a day of rest. LGBTQ protests have surrounded the new Chick-fil-A over the company's...
Will John Travolta be in this? In the prequel?
I don't know, Brian.
John Travolta.
Yeah, but
really young.
A Barbarino,
That's so
John.
exciting.
It is exciting. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Coming up.
Would you follow that story, Jillian? Throughout the day? Okay, good.
When did they say it's coming out, Jillian? Did they say?
Shortly.
Shortly.
Reporter.
Okay.
Charlie. All right, Jillian's gone. Attorney General William Barr grilled on Capitol Hill as he confirms he's gathering a team to look into how the Russian probe began.
I am reviewing the conduct of the investigation and trying to get my arms around all the aspects of the counterintelligence investigation.
Wow, finally. So what happens now? A former Justice Department attorney. Next. Democrats grilling Attorney General William Barr over the Mueller probe report in what was supposed to be a boring budget hearing. And the AG revealed he's reviewing how the probe began in July of 2016.
I am reviewing the conduct of the investigation and trying to get my arms around all the aspects of the counterintelligence investigation that was conducted during the summer of 2016.
Whitaker didn't have the power, Sessions didn't have the interest, but Barr's going to do it. Hans von Spakovsky is a senior law fellow at the Heritage Foundation and former attorney at the U.S. Department of Justice. So we wait for the Inspector General report to come out. That'll be around May. Where does Barr come in with this team that he assembled to look into the origins of the investigation?
Well, remember, the Inspector General can just make recommendations. They can only make recommendations, for example, for termination, disciplining of DOJ and FBI employees or criminal prosecutions. That's something the Attorney General can only do. And look, we now know that the Russian collusion claim was a complete hoax. So obviously we need to go back and look, well, does that mean there really was no evidence that the FBI had a basis to use for opening a law enforcement investigation and a counterintelligence operation? If they had no evidence to do that, then they may have abused their authority and their power as federal law enforcement officials.
Yeah, how Hillary Clinton was excused from this, what Comey actually said in July, and then how they went after Papadopoulos and Carter Page, and if you weave in everything else as dossier, no longer will that be put in the fringe, that'll be front and center. Meanwhile, the Democrats had a whole different agenda. Watch.
2.5 weeks ago, the Mueller report was completed in extremely quick fashion. You turn a 300-plus page report into a 4-page letter that supposedly summarized the findings.
I want to address a serious oversight matter, your unacceptable handling of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report.
Hans, he kept his composure. I know it's going to be increased today in front of the Senate, but they went over and they said Mueller turned down the opportunity to review the summary. They knew about the general feelings of the report before they actually got the 400 pages. It looks like Rod Rosenstein was updated along the way that possibly that there was no collusion, and March 5th is when they found out obstruction was still up in the air. What else did you get from that line of questioning?
Well, the questioning was wrong in saying that it was a summary of the report. It was not a summary of the report. The letter that Barr sent over was, look, here are the conclusions of the report. And the conclusion of the report obviously is the most important thing. No obstruction of justice, no evidence of collusion. You know, the other thing they kept doing was they kept bullying Barr into trying to force him to turn over the entire report when they know he can't do it because of federal law and Justice Department protocols.
And Nadler says, after listening to him, he plans on using a subpoena to get the grand jury testimony. He's not going to get the grand jury testimony.
No, he can't. Federal law prohibits the release of grand jury information and evidence. And Barr, like I said, Barr was steadfast. They're going through the report. He's working with Bob Mueller and the Bob Mueller team to take out materials that the law says they can't release, and that includes grand jury material and classified material. And I actually admire Barr for standing up to the committee and not giving in, particularly because he's trying to follow the law, which the committee is not doing.
Which is different from the Starr report. Many of these rules were because of the Starr report. Hans,
that's right.
Yeah, this is just the beginning. We're going to hear more today, get a little bit more information, and then they say within a week we're going to get the whole report. Then if there's even one redaction, the Democrats will say cover up. Hans, thanks so much.
Sure, thanks for having me.
All right, 11 minutes before the top of the hour. Get this, a measles outbreak in 19 states now, rivaling record numbers. Could the anti-vaccine movement be to blame? That story's next. Glad you're up. Hope you're dressed. Here are your headlines. Texas Tech Medical School will no longer factor in race in its admissions process. The school is scrapping affirmative action as part of an agreement with the Department of Education. 14 years ago, someone filed a complaint about Texas Tech, even though they didn't apply to the school. And California Democrats approved a bill to force health clinics to provide abortion pills on college campuses. According to the Washington Times, that is. The College Student Right to Access Act would cost about $10 million in private funds. It's expected to be passed by the full state Senate. Now this.
Meanwhile, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez thinks she has the answer to what is fueling the immigration crisis on our southern border.
The freshman Democrat tweeting out, the far right loves to drum up fear and resistance to immigrants. But have you ever noticed they never talk about what's causing people to flee their homes in the first place? Perhaps that's because they'd be forced to confront one major factor fueling global migration: climate change.
Exactly. Here to react, Fox Nation host Tomi Lahren. Tommy, it all comes back to the new Green Deal.
Yeah, she's still trying to make that happen, even though members of her own party didn't stand up and support her on that one. But again, this is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez projecting more excuses as to why illegal immigration is okay and we should all accept it. I think that she and other Democrats are starting to see that Americans are waking up. Americans are seeing that there is, in fact, a crisis at the border. Americans are tired of being taken advantage of. Even Democrats, I believe, are starting to see this. We're seeing even Obama-era officials saying that we have an immigration problem. So what do? They pile on more excuses. Now, illegal immigrants are coming to this country due to climate change. Again, excuse after excuse to try to feed this to the American people. I don't think it's going to work, especially when it's being fed by someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Well, it is something we hadn't heard before, something new. All right, meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about something new. The president's approval rating is now, according to Rasmussen, at 53%. I think I saw somewhere online this morning that it is higher than any of the approval ratings for former President Obama at any time in his third year. Meanwhile, Chelsea Handler was on The View yesterday, and she had this observation about white privilege, and we were so taken by the bite, we thought everybody should see it this morning. So here she is yesterday on The View.
So I figured start with myself so that, you know, I can hang myself out to dry at my own privilege and my own reaction to the presidency, like a spoiled brat. Like, what? You know, like the way that so many people were crying and screaming. And it was like, well, nothing in your life has ever gone that wrong before. And I really had to take a look and go, no. Yes, my brother died. That was traumatic and awful. But I've never been hungry. I've never been starving. I've never been discriminated against that I knew about. And I think as, you know, as a person with a platform, you have to start thinking about what kind of contribution you're going to make when we see the things that are going on in this world.
Well, how did Chelsea handle that?
Well, I think at least she's finally being honest that she is indeed a spoiled brat. But look, she was also on Real Time with Bill Maher last week, and she was saying how the election of Donald Trump forced her to seek psychiatric help. She had to pay a therapist to rant about Donald Trump for the first 3 weeks after the election. It caused her to smoke marijuana. Again, this is liberals with Trump derangement syndrome who can't seem to accept a fair and free election. They also can't stomach the fact that Americans think differently than they do and that they voted differently than those in Hollywood and those liberals. So I'm glad that she is recognizing her privilege, but it's not white privilege, it's liberal privilege, and I hope that more like her will do the same.
All right, Tommy, thank you so much. I know your book goes on sale July 2nd, so people can pre-order that now. It's called Never Play Dead, and there's the cover. Congratulations.
And also you can catch her on Fox Nation.
That's right.
Twice a day.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thanks, Tommy.
Twice a day, every day. Thank you, guys.
Indeed. All right.
28 minutes after the top of the hour. A new study says half of the pastors out there are afraid to speak out on social issues because they might offend someone. How can we change that? Our panel of pastors here to discuss that next.